Howdy guys, Jimmy Song here. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk, issue number 175. And today we're going to talk about Taproot and a bunch of other stuff. If you are very familiar with what I do and the content that I put out, please help me by subscribing and hitting that like button. I would love to get some more people knowing about all of the technical details and things like that I'm going to discuss on this show. So I would really appreciate that. Anyway, with that in mind, let's go over to my main screen. Before I go on, let me just plug a couple of things. I will be at Unconfiscatable in Las Vegas, and this is Tone's conference, and it's going to be mostly on Saturday. We're all going to have like a carnivory dinner. There's like even a pinball tournament and possibly and there's a poker tournament as well. Anyway, I am going to be at this thing, so please, if you are going to be in Vegas, let me know. I also have some books that I've written that you can go and buy from Amazon. I have Programming Bitcoin, and I also have the Little Bitcoin book. And both of those are available on Amazon for reasonable prices. And if you are interested in learning Bitcoin from me, you can register for the next two sessions that I'm going to have: San Francisco, March 25th, 26th, and Antwerp, Belgium, April 23rd, 24th. And it is like this is how you can learn. I have students in Bitcoin companies around the world, and many of them have gone on to contribute to Core and so on. So this is very good for the ecosystem, very good for me, very good for you. So encourage those people that you know are technically talented to get into this thing. All right, so let's take a look at this week's issue. It's a bit longer than I usually do. There were just so many stories, like just interesting things that were happening this week that that I didn't really expect. But that's kind of how news flows sometimes. Sometimes there's just like a flood of news one week and then not that many the next week and so on. Anyway, I wrote last week about Taproot, and specifically there were three different emails from this anonymous group of developers, and basically they were talking about various Taproot things and saying, hey, can we like, here are the concerns or questions that we have towards this stuff. And they nicknamed themselves the group, so that's how I refer to them in the newsletter. But basically, I wrote about it. They were asking questions on the dev list, and basically there were a lot of different responses. So this one's from Matt Corallo, this one's from David Harding, this one is from Jonas Nick, this one was from Anthony Towns, and this one was from anonymous developer ZMNSCPXJ. So lots of interesting ones. Just to summarize what Taproot is, it's essentially a way to combine both pay-to-pub-key hash and pay-to-script hash without essentially much or any penalty using the best security practices for hiding them, which is the innovation that Greg Maxwell put out when he published Taproot. But basically the idea is you have to have a key path and a script path. And the thing about the key path is that with the addition of Schnorr, it allows you to do not just a single key, but n of n. So if you have like three keys, as long as all three agree, you can use the single key path in exactly the same way as a single key would, because as far as the blockchain is concerned, they can't tell which Schnorr signature is using music. Pay to script hash, you can have different conditions, and you can put them all in essentially a Merkle tree and say, okay, well, here are the 7 conditions, but I'm only going to reveal the condition that I know you only need to reveal the one condition and so on. And that's how Taproot works. Now, the questions that the group had. One of them was, okay, is the N of N single key, this is the Musig Schnorr variant of the single key version, is that really useful? Is that going to be something that people are going to actually use? And Matt Corallo essentially pointed out, well, actually, it doesn't really matter, because by having it there and because it's cheaper to use the single key path, we're effectively incentivizing developers to prioritize using the N of N path. And that's a very good thing, because in turn, that means that more people are going to have additional privacy because developers will be writing this. And that's a very, very good thing. Another question from the group was, why are we doing both Taproot and Schnorr together? Why not just deploy Taproot and then deploy Schnorr? Why are we doing them together? And David Harding essentially replied that, like, Taproot and Schnorr optimize for the use cases that we know people like on Bitcoin. Specifically, it's single key, which is about 50% or more of, actually, I think it's more like 70% of all transactions. N of N and K of N. These are multi-sig, basically. Those are the most common use cases on chain right now. So, like, why wouldn't you? It's a big privacy win if you combine both of them, and you get N of N for free if you add Schnorr. So that was his argument, essentially. Anthony Towns wrote a very comprehensive response, which I'll do a long read of in a bit. And lastly, ZMNSCPXJ pointed out that parties themselves are like, not just the developers are incentivized to create more N of N paths, but the parties themselves, right? Like, if you have N parties, and there's some combinations in which some of them can agree, in order to save money, right, on fees, using the script path requires more bytes, so it's going to cost more in fees. If you use the N of N path, it's cheaper, so they're more incentivized to use the N of N path as well. It's sort of like, good game, you could do this, but I mean, if one of them isn't available, you still use the script path. But the parties themselves will want to use the N of N. So in a sense, the N of N is useful for that, because if you want to save some money on fees, then that's the direction you go. Anyway, I found the rebuttals pretty convincing, and I like that the group brought these technical questions to the forefront, and thinking about it in a critical way is absolutely critical to understanding all of this and making sure that we have the best technology being released. But I came away convinced by the rebuttals that that launching these two specifically sort of hits the sweet spot between doing too few things, or like doing one thing at a time. So we're being very conservative in like sort of releasing things very slowly, versus the other extreme of releasing everything at once and getting a lot of features. So I think we're hitting the sweet spot because we're getting a lot of the privacy benefits out of Taproot. All right, this is an interesting post from Ledger. Basically, they are arguing about, let me just close all these other windows real quick. Ledger has this interesting thing called Ledger Academy, and they're basically talking about the different types of hardware wallets that they can have. Now, it's a little bit self-serving in the sense that they're really only talking about hardware, right? Like, they're talking about MCUs and safe memory chips and secure elements. And they're saying, well, we're the only one with secure elements. Actually, well, there are other ones that have secure elements. But the fact is that their code is closed source, so you have no idea what's going on underneath. Whereas the other, like something like Coldcard or Trezor, they might be using different types of chips, but they've open sourced their stuff. So they're drawbacks to both. So Slush from Trezor has essentially responded to that post, saying, Ledger is being dishonest as it points out only part of the whole story. And I agree that they're only pointing out part of the whole story. And basically, Slush is saying, I'll talk more about these issues of whole chip manufacturing industry and implications of NDAs 10 user security on Bitcoin 2020 in March. So I'm looking forward to that talk. That's definitely something I will attend, and I look forward to hearing from them. I read through BIP 320 this past week, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically using version bits in a different way than Softworks for BIP 9. So it's repurposing them so that miners can use it, so we can get more security for the same hashing power. Some interesting research suggests that orphan transactions incur 17% overhead. This is an academic paper based on what you do with orphan transactions. And orphan transactions are where you don't know what the parent transaction is, right? Like sometimes you just get these transactions, and it refers to a previous transaction that you don't have in your mempool or in the blockchain. So you're like, where did this come from? And there's a limit right now in Bitcoin of 100 such transactions that are, or that's the default anyway, that you keep around in case you do find a parent, and then you go, okay, well now I know what's going on. We could we don't have to, we can validate it now, and so on. And apparently it incurs kind of a drastic traffic overhead, 17%. And the paper suggests that changing the default to 1,000 could mitigate it. I hope core devs are looking at this paper and saying, okay, maybe we should change the default. What are the drawbacks? Let's test it, see what happens, and so on. Alex Gladstein has written a really cool essay on a world without Bitcoin. And, he's talking about the world of 2040 and what it might be, and so on, with and without Bitcoin. Very good, story, and it's an expansion of chapter 5 of the book I wrote with him, the Little Bitcoin book. You should definitely check it out if you are interested in sort of the human rights aspects of, having privacy around your money. And a scary precedent, this guy was running a Bitcoin mixing service, and apparently he got arrested for running that mixing service. And that's not good. You don't want software developers going to prison because they wrote software. Apparently he did a bunch of other things that might fall under, criminal sanctions or whatever. So, it's definitely something to keep a close eye on if you are a developer, because it's a slippery slope down to where you start punishing coders for coding. All right, Lightning. All right, so I talked about Strike a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's a fantastic product. They're still in beta though, and you need to sign up and ask them for permission to download that app and so on. I found out about Escher. Basically, it's very similar to Strike at Advancing Bitcoin. And basically, they're doing something extremely similar to Strike. It looks like this is kind of like a killer use case that a lot of people are going towards. So, essentially, you can pay Lightning invoices with your bank card or bank account or something like that. And I think that would be fantastic. That means Lightning becomes sort of like a universal rail and allows people without bank accounts to still sell goods and services in a reasonable way. All right, so this research paper I talked a little bit about on Tone Show, but basically it's a second path towards towards centralization of the Bitcoin economy. Essentially, Christian Decker works from C Lightning. He works for Blockstream. He knows what he's talking about. So he put his name on this paper. It definitely needs to be. We definitely need to pay attention to anything he's saying. But basically. The paper argues that by almost any measure of centralization, right, like amount of channels, number of nodes connected, and things like that, the Lightning Network is getting more centralized. And I would say that that's because most people are optimizing right now for fees, right? Like they don't want to pay that many fees in order to get to, they want the quickest, cheapest route possible. And they're not, say, like trying to get anonymous transactions. Those have to be prioritized in your routing algorithm and so on in order to make it less centralized. This does put some pressure on the network. If one of these services that's like a hub goes down, then you can't pay, and that kind of sucks. But that's also going to teach people to move to other, create more channels and with other parties and so on. So I think it's part of the growth process of the Lightning Network, and it will fix itself over time, given that there will be users that are demanding it. All right. Economics, engineering, etc. So Phil Bonello, I don't know who he is, but he wrote a really nice long read on the many angles of Bitcoin adoption, and it's just you can just look at the headlines and kind of get an idea. Bitcoin presents a prisoner's dilemma for nation states, which is absolutely true. The central bank that first adopts it is going to get way more value. Bitcoin is digital gold. That's what a lot of people use it for. Bitcoin is an uncorrelated alternative investment. This is for portfolio theory. Bitcoin is a millennial movement. A lot of young people are much more comfortable with this because it's easier to store and so on. Bitcoin is a tool for survival, social good, and dissonance. It's a way to check out of the current system. Bitcoin is driving profitability of new renewable energy. Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the decade, and so on. So very nice long read. Encourage you to read it, but it goes through all of the ways in which Bitcoin is, has network effects. It's similar to, I think, what Trice Mayer talks about. Safety Anonymous is pre-selling copies of his next book, Principles of Economics, which in of itself is very interesting. $200, you get to read the book as it's being written. I really enjoyed the Bitcoin Standard, and I was fortunate to get a pre-draft copy, and I gave him feedback and so on. So if you're a fan, I think this is an interesting model that not many people have done. Dragonfly Research. So this is a really good article. They did another article that I shared last week about the death of plasma. This one is about Bitcoin Gold and how if 51% attacked, got a lot of money. How does the economics work, right? Like, and basically they're arguing that it didn't cost that much. The ROI was through the roof. So how is it that, no one is delisting BTG, particularly Binance? And it turns out that Binance makes a ton of money off of BTG because people like to just sort of continuously trade it. So, despite the fact that a lot of coins do get, 51% attacked and so on, and it's exchanges that essentially suffer, it ends up being okay, and it ends up being okay. Now you're just going to need more of these attacks to happen in order for them to actually delist the coins. But for now, it's profitable, and that's why they keep them. But as far as why 51% attack coins sometimes appreciate, unfortunately, that still remains a mystery. I suspect that has something to do with the fact that a lot of these exchanges, soon as they're 51% attack, they stop deposits and withdrawals. So they become sort of like unhooked from other exchanges, and there's no liquidity between them. So it encourages sort of like an increase in price because the market can't really react. All right, let's see. Binance has published a nice introduction to confidential transactions. This is what powers a lot of Liquid and I think Mimblewimble to some degree and so on. It's a nice overview, and if you want to know the math about it, I would encourage you to read that. So Blockstack, I talked about this on Tone Show, but they basically stopped their app subsidy network or app subsidy program basically, and they were giving out hundreds of thousands of dollars every month in Bitcoin and their native token in order to get app developers to create apps on their platform. Essentially, they got gamed, and a lot of these apps were pretty crappy, but they got paid out anyway, so they're stopping the program. And that's this is what governments or centralized entities tend to do. It's hilarious that they call themselves decentralized. They've also been criticized because they unlocked $6.8 million for essentially getting 1 million users. Like basically when they did their token raise or their ICO, they locked up a lot of their funds and said, until we reach these milestones, we're not going to get a lot of this money. And apparently they reached their second milestone, which was, we have 1 million users now. Of course, it turns out that each one of these, like, there's no way there's 1 million users on Blockstack. Like that's ridiculous. It's not that they actually got 1 million users. They had 1 million username registrations on the Blockstack network. And that's, that's so incredibly easy to game. And this is what you're doing when you invest in an ICO. You're basically trusting them not to screw you over. And they're kind of like playing the game, right? Like it's decentralization theater, or it's, we're complying with this or whatever. And it's not. And this is why I don't like projects like this. All right, IOTA stopped their blockchain and basically they're spinning it as some sort of attack on their chain. Really, it's their really crappy security around whatever it is that they're doing. And you wouldn't have something like that if you actually were decentralized or something like that. And instead, they have a coordinator service that they can just sort of stop, which is exactly what they did. Handshake has airdrop tokens. So Handshake is from JJ. If you don't know who he is, he's the main developer behind Bcoin, which is an alternate implementation of the Bitcoin core of the Bitcoin full node software. It's written in JavaScript and so on. But basically, he's been working on this for 2 years, and they did something really interesting, which was they gave their airdrop tokens to 250,000 users on GitHub based on how many followers that they had. So if you have more than 15 followers, it's locked to your SSH key that you registered with GitHub, which most developers know how to do, and they have it on there. But it's locked to your SSH key, which is kind of nice actually, because you don't have to reveal anything with Bitcoin or any other coin really. You just have to rotate that key out of wherever you're using it, and you can use that to go and claim these coins, and especially if you don't trust them. So the coins are dropping like mad because I think it was like 45 cents when I registered for this thing on Friday. It's like 20 cents now, right? Like it's all of the airdroppers are dumping their coins and getting Bitcoin out of it. You do get like 4,000 something coins, so even at like 20 cents, it's like $900. So it's not a bad thing, and you can exchange it for Bitcoin right away. The only thing is you have to wait like 120 blocks after you get the airdrop, so that takes like a day. And but hey, it's free money if you don't mind rotating your keys. Not a bad way to get paid. All right, I will be in Las Vegas, and I'll have some books. Let's go on to my Twitter feed and do that part. Let's see actually when Black Hat Jimmy, when I'm crapping on some project at a conference or something like that. What is Mast? Yeah, so we'll talk about Mast a little bit when I read through AJ Towns' stuff. Hey, what's with all the dislikes? Smash the like. Yeah, I haven't seen how many people are disliking, but who cares? Why is Jimmy wearing a secret Blockstream satellite dish disguised as a cowboy hat on his head? Well, I need to know my blocks, right? All right, so let's take a look at my profile and go back to last week and explain some of my tweets. All right, so I did a show February 10th. Okay, so all right, so so Hong Kong got canceled because of coronavirus. So now I'm doing programming blockchain in San Francisco right before Bitcoin 2020. If you want to apply, that's the link. There was something like 30 hard forks of Bitcoin that allowed deposits and were trading for non-zero value on exchanges back in 2018. Now it's down to about 4. Airdropping to Bitcoin holders seems to have been a bad move. So this is something that I realized when I was looking at various exchanges and see how many of them still allow deposits. Essentially, we're down to 4. We have Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Diamond, and Bitcoin Gold. That's it. Pretty much every other coin, it's like near impossible to go trade for Bitcoin. And all of those coins are dead because there's no developer activity and they've been dumped to death. And most of these exchanges don't want any more deposits because then the price goes down and nobody really wants to trade it. So it's been an interesting ride. I think Adam had like sort of the best response. So long, Forks, and thanks for all the free Bitcoin. Anyone have good statistics on how much BCH BSV still hasn't split from BTC? I suspect there's a significant amount out there still that a significant enough pump would get them out of cold storage. So somebody did respond. It's something like 6 million, of which like 4 million are probably lost. So there's still about 2 million there. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see when that dump is going to happen. But I suspect that most BCH and BSV is in just a few holders. People like Jihan Wu and Roger Ver and people like that who are essentially hoarding it and sort of artificially restricting the supply through like a single person hoard. But I mean, I'm not entirely sure about this, but that's my suspicion on why it's pumping. And it's essentially if you lost like one or more of those patrons, it's all that coin is done for. How much of a pump is really people reacting to news, and how much of it is traders front running said people? Do such people even exist? This is doubly so for altcoin pumps, where reacting to such fake news is particularly stupid. I suspect it's almost all traders. So yeah, I've always wondered about this, right? Like you have news and then it pumps. How much of it is on perception of how other people will react versus how you actually would naturally react? I suspect it's more on the perception of how other people react that actually causes anything. For those of you that haven't been in a bull market before, some advice: don't pick up pennies in front of a steamroller. That's me telling you, just don't try to time markets on shitcoins. It doesn't work very well. Paying a little bit more now is much better than paying a lot more later. If you think it's going to go up, just pay a little more now. Like if you're looking at 50x gains, you're not going to remember the 5% you saved earlier. Don't beat yourself up if you don't time everything perfectly. This goes for everybody. I mean, like tops and bottoms happen in minutes, so you're not going to be able to time them. Envy is real, and this is something that you have to realize, is that there are a lot of people that will not like your success in this stuff. So, yeah, you need to practice some privacy and so on. When shitcoins Bitcoins pump, it's not necessarily true the other way around. When Bitcoin pumps, shitcoins don't necessarily pump. And that we've seen this. There's a little bit of a decoupling that's been happening. I talked through BIP 320. Let us drink from the salty tears of our enemies and delight in their mental gymnastics. They brought the Bitcoin derangement syndrome upon themselves and sing songs of melancholy at how the world won't see their genius. Watch and laugh, for they refuse to see reality. Was feeling a little poetic, I guess. But basically, a lot of them do suffer from Bitcoin derangement syndrome and will say almost anything that will justify their position instead of listening to reality. I did a show on, some of the stories. I did 2 shows with Tone this week. Requirements to enter into the fellowship of Bitcoin holders: humility, perseverance, and patience. Virtue and rewards await those who enter into this fellowship. Yeah, a lot of people just refuse to humble themselves and say, okay, Bitcoin was right? Like, and I was wrong. A lot of people also don't have the wherewithal to persevere through all of the ups and downs. And a lot of people just don't have the patience, right? They want to make money now. And it's really just saying low time preference, check your ego at the door and, hodl. That's basically it. Most altcoins face one of 2 fates technically: stagnation, runaway, technical debt. The first is due to indifference. The second is due to incompetence. And this is, again, my observation that a lot of these hard fork coins have died. And why did they die? Well, a lot of them, it was because of stagnation, right? Like they didn't have any more developers that were committed to doing things as the price went down. And then you have runaway technical debt. This is essentially what's happened to Ethereum, where they design things so poorly that they have to patch things, and then those things have bugs, and then they have to patch that, and those things have bugs, and you have runaway technical debt to the point where they're saying, okay, we're just going to scrap it and do it all over with the Ethereum 2.0. That's what happens to projects when you design things very poorly. Bitcoin bureaucrat, company or person that believes in helping people understand Bitcoin, but in reality confuse people into not understanding Bitcoin at all. See shitcoin apologist, Bitcoin denialism, blockchain enthusiast, Bitcoin rent seeker. And this is the sad reality of a lot of especially companies that are promoting altcoins. They think they're being helpful. They're really not. They're just driving their own agenda. Centralized entities can give birth to a decentralized platform about as well as a cow can give birth to a shark, and this is just the reality of decentralized things. You can't have centralized entities really give birth to them. What's your best tip for entering flow state? A lot of good responses if you're interested in life hacking. Making a multi-sig wallet, what features would interest you? The thing that I think I got most often out of that is, hey, I want more. I want it to be compatible with hardware wallets, and I want it to be easy to use. I'm making a wallet more to learn, but I'm open sourcing it, so I'll take a look at that. Bitcoin anti-fragile. Oh, let's look at the Sunday survey. Are you satisfied with your security around your Bitcoins? Most people are, but there's a surprising amount of people that are using a cold wallet that don't like their setup, or they want a multi-sig setup. So I think there's definitely demand on the market for this. Bitcoin anti-fragile, low time preference, decentralized. DeFi fragile, high time preference, centralized. These two shouldn't be in the same universe, let alone the same category. I find it hilarious that DeFi goes through these hacks once in a while, or crazy scenarios. That's very fragile because it requires lots of centralized entities that are taking one side of the trade or the other, and it's extremely high time preference because it's locking up a lot of it's locking up for some gain right now and things like that, and it's very centralized. You're vulnerable to admin keys and so on. Bitcoin is the opposite, and that's why I think it should be the other way around. I think this was my most popular tweet this week. I wouldn't mind a 10 to 20% dip here if it means alts crash by 70% plus. The malinvestments from the last bubble don't feel finished 2+ years later. There's a lot of malinvestment, and they need to die. That's the only way productive things and good things in civilization come forward, is when the malinvestments die. And I want a lot of these altcoins to stop being distractions to everybody and instead focus on Bitcoin adoption. So that's why I wouldn't mind the dip here if it means that we get rid of a lot of distractions. And Udi disagreed with me. I like Jimmy, but I disagree here. I do not wish losses upon anyone and don't need to see alts crash to feel better. I think morally it is okay to hope for a crash if you put your money where your mouth is and shorter it. Otherwise, you're wishing ill on others for no reason. No, I mean, well, here's the point, right? Economics is about unseen effects. It's easy to see traders and altcoiners getting wrecked, but they kind of put themselves in that position. It's not so easy to see that there will be a lot less people getting scammed in the future, or the incentives for terrible behavior being curbed. And that's really what I want, is for more people to not get scammed. And if these altcoins continue to pump or continue to stay even neutral, that the incentives are all wrong, and I think it hurts a lot more people than it helps. So I'd rather have a little more pain now and undergo surgery and fix things than wait it out and suffer a little bit for a long time. That's basically my perspective here. All right. All right. Let's do our long read, and that's going to be Anthony Towns' response about Taproot. Let's read it, and this is from Anthony Towns. He published it last Monday. However, after our review, we're left perplexed about the development of Taproot and Graftroot to a lesser extent. I think the main cause of the perplexity is not seeing the benefit of Taproot. For me, the simplest benefit is that Taproot lets everyone's wallets change from, if you lose this key, your funds are gone, to, if you lose this key, you'll have to recover three of your 5 backup keys that you sent to trusted friends and pay a little more. but you won't have lost your funds. That won't cost you anything beyond upgrading your wallet software hardware. If you never lose your main key, it doesn't cost you any more, but if you do, you now have a new recovery option or many recovery options. Note that doing Taproot isn't proposed as it requires non-interactive half-signature aggregation to be comparably efficient, and the crypto hasn't been worked out for that, or at least the maths haven't been properly written up for criticism. If you don't care about efficiency, you can do a poor man's Taproot with pre-signed transactions and see child pays for parent. All right, so basically what he's arguing here is that what Taproot allows is, instead of having just a single key and that's it, you now have a free recovery option with a backup key, with the script tree. So you can say, okay, well, it's spendable by one, or I have these backup options, and I want to make sure that that gets in too. And that's an excellent way to take advantage of Taproot. You have a free recovery option in case you lose your wallet or whatever. And there, you know about all of these stories of people that have lost their private keys and now it's just sort of unspendable for the rest of time. What Anthony is saying here is you now have a free backup option, and you can take it as long as the wallet software implements it. And that's a big win. That's a huge win. That's from a user perspective for almost anybody, it's going to be a giant win. All right, there's a bit of the question from the group was, in essence, Taproot is fundamentally the same as doing masked and Schnorr signatures separately. Suppose a mask for these looks like this. If we want this to be functionally equivalent to Taproot, we add a root path. And, masked is basically Taproot. Taproot takes a lot of the masked stuff and puts it into a particular thing. But what the group is arguing is it's the same as masked. Why are we doing them? Why are we doing it this way with Taproot? I'll read this. There's a bit more subtlety in the difference between a Merkle branch and a Taproot alternative. In particular, imagine you've got three alternatives, one of which has 60% odds of being taken. The other two have 20% odds each. You construct a Merkle tree, ABC, that would reveal ABC. Or your overhead would be 32 bytes 60% of the time and 64 bytes 40% of the time. With Taproot, you construct a tree of much the same shape, but 60% of the time you no longer have to reveal anything about the path not taken. So your overhead is 0 bytes 60% of the time, 65 bytes 40% of the time, for an expected overhead of 26 bytes. The math only works out as an improvement if your common case really is or can be made to be a simple key path to spend, though. You can generalize Taproot and combine it quickly with a Merkle tree arbitrarily, and the end result being that using a Merkle branch means that you can choose either the left or right subtree for a cost of 32 bytes, while a Taproot branch lets you choose the left leaf for free. Yeah, and this is the key, right? Taproot is different than masked in the sense that the pub key branch, this is the most used case in Bitcoin, right? Single key, or with Schnorr N of N, which is combined there. That is something that you get for free. You don't have to reveal any hashes. You don't have to do any additional revealing. And from a fee perspective, it's cheaper. And that's the most used case. And this was Greg's argument when he introduced Taproot, is that you don't have to go down this complicated path as you do in masked in order to reveal something that's probably going to be the most common anyway. So that's the argument here, right? Like, that's the main argument. Ultimately, I think we can do better so that you could choose whether to make the free Taproot path be a key or a script, or to use the Taproot method to make any other likely leaves cheaper than unlikely ones, rather than just having that benefit available for the most likely leaf. But I also think that's a lot of work, much of which will overlap with the work to get cross-input signature aggregation working. So for what it's worth, my view that the current Taproot feature set is a good midway point, draws a line, and gets stuff out released. This overall approach was discussed quite a while ago. So basically, like the cross-input signature aggregation, like you could probably do better and decide like which path you get for free, because the way Taproot works is that Right now, the pub key is free, and that's either pub key or n of n schnorr, and that's it. The script side, you can have whatever you want, but it costs a little more because you have to reveal more hashes. What he's saying is you can have different stuff in the free stuff, but that's a lot of work, and we're not necessarily like we'd be optimizing for something that we're not sure is that useful. So, and there's also cross-input signature aggregation, which everybody wants for version 2 to incentivize coin joins, and a lot of that work's going to have to be done there anyway. However, if we do the same script via Taproot, we now need to provide the base pub key as well as the root hash and path, and then the extra scripts. You need to provide the internal public key, the actual script, and the path back. The root hash is essentially calculated from the script and the path, and then verified by ECC math against the script pub key and the internal pub key. So he's correcting sort of a mistake that the group made in terms of the calculation. We could argue that this is more private than Taproot because we don't distinguish between the schnorr key case and the other cases by default. So chain analyzers can't tell if the signature came from the Taproot case or from one of the script paths. In that example, there is no Taproot case. You reveal the existence of other paths no matter which leaf you make use of. In particular, the pub key schnorr checksig alternative now has 96 bytes of additional overhead. So basically, you're not getting much of the benefits that the group is outlining in this scenario while you're paying some of the costs, which is 96 bytes of additional overhead. This allows you to not completely fracture the anonymity set between people who want plain schnorr and people who want mass, at least until they go spent. The benefit of Taproot is that often you can preserve the anonymity set even after you spend, which is kind of true, right? Like if you're using n of n, you don't reveal anything, so you keep the anonymity set after you spend because nobody knows what the other paths were or who's involved at all. Overall, we are left with the concerns about the merit of doing Taproot versus alternatives, as well as the process through which we got to be here. One, is Taproot actually more private than bare, masked, and schnorr separately? What are the actual anonymity set benefits compared to doing it separately? Yes. Presuming the single pub key, single signature remains a common authorization pattern, and that is what is used by almost everybody today. I mean, there are multi-sig transactions out on the blockchain, but vast majority, I think, are single key. Is Taproot actually cheaper than bare, masked, and schnorr separately? What evidence do we have that the assumptions it will be more common to use Taproot with a key will outweigh script cases? Taproot with a key is about as cheap as it gets. You've got 35 bytes script pub key and 66 bytes of witness data. It's then 33 bytes of witness data more expensive to use a script, which presumably will make it more likely that people will use the simple key path. At the same time, you create a UTXO, provided you don't reuse keys. All Taproot spends are indistinguishable. At the time you spend a Taproot UTXO, you can distinguish spent via script path, key path, spent via script path, internal key not known, spent via script path, internal key known, known nums point. But there's no fee rate advantage between reusing a nums point and generating a fresh nums point via nums plus rang. So the third case is avoidable. So what he's talking about here is that, like we do know that like Taproot is, first of all, really cheap is the point in this paragraph here. Like single key becomes super cheap because you don't have to reveal anything. It's calculated. Looking at blocks 616650 to 616700, I see outputs of pub key, witness, script hash, witness key hash, pub key hash, script hash. So for plain SegWit, over 95% of outputs are plain key. So that's a vast majority of a single key outputs. So this is by far, right now at least, the most used case. And what he's arguing is that's the justification for why you want to prioritize the single key. A key will outweigh the script case. Yeah, I mean, he's showing stats to back up his point. And overall, over 57.5% of outputs are plain key signature. That's not counting however many pay to script hash encoded, pay to witness pub key hash there are, because they'll just look like pay to pub key hash until they're spent. Is Taproot riskier than Bear, Mast, and Schnorr separately given the new crypto? I don't think so. Most of the risk for either of those is in getting the details right. Yeah, I would agree with that, like from a technical perspective. How well reviewed is the actual crypto parts? That's pretty hard to evaluate if you can't review the crypto parts yourself, but some resources are. And yeah, he did the whole Taproot review with 100 developers. Most of the complicated crypto parts are at the application layer. This is true. Musig, threshold signatures, adapter signatures, scriptless scripts. These are all layers on top. So this isn't protocol level changes. All of those things have to be implemented by the software. None of us personally feel comfortable reviewing the crypto in Schnorr. What's the set of people who have thoroughly reviewed the crypto and aren't just acting because they trust other developers to have looked at it close enough? That sounds like it's asking for a group of other developers that have looked at it close enough for you to trust. That's actually what it is asking for, but a lot of them have. Design-wise, couldn't we forego the nums point requirement and be able to check if it's a hash root directly? That would decrease the anonymity set by a lot, but makes the code a bit more complicated and only ends up saving 8 virtual bytes. And that's true. You want to preserve the anonymity set. And I think 8 virtual bytes versus having a larger anonymity set, that's actually very good. Is the development model of trying to jam a bunch of features into Bitcoin all at once good for Bitcoin development? Would we be better off if we embraced incremental improvements that can work together, Mast and then Schnorr? In my opinion, the driving force for bundling these changes together is the advantage of Taproot. That is, you can have either a simple public key and signature to authorize the spend, or you can have a script and decide which to use to spend. Using the key path comes at no cost compared to not using Taproot. Adding a script path comes at no cost if you don't end up using it. If you can interactively verify the script conditions off-chain, you can always use the key path. The latter of these means that we want Schnorr so that key path can be multi-sig. And using Schnorr means that we can use scriptless scripts, adapted signatures for things like Lightning, making the key path more common. So in other words, the reason why we combine Schnorr and Taproot, or the bundling as the group calls it, is because with Taproot, you have a single key case, but you can't make that multi-sig unless you also add Schnorr. And the single key case being multi-sig is actually huge, and adding Schnorr allows you to do that. You can't do Taproot cheaply with SegWit v0. You'd have to use pay-to-witness script hash and then reveal something like point opt taproot verify drop 1 as the script, then have either a signature or the script and its witness data encoded as the arguments to that script, which is ugly, but more importantly requires an extra 37 odd byte reveal of the point every time. So that leads to doing SegWit v1, as otherwise you'd lose the malleability protection SegWit brought, or you'd have to re-implement SegWit to allow a top-level opt taproot verify to use witness data. If you're using SegWit v1, you might as well make it so script is more upgradable. Otherwise, as soon as you want to upgrade script further, you'll end up having to jump to SegWit v2. That brings in the generalization of pay-to-script hash that allows different scripts to satisfy a script via a Merkle path, the leaf version, op success, and the check sig changes, and that pretty much covers everything that's in BIPs 340 to 342. So he's justifying why we're bundling these together, right? So we know that Taproot is there because it gives you all of these backup protections, anonymity sets, increases privacy, all of that stuff for free. But if you want additional anonymity and you want multi-sig on the single key path, you have to bring in Schnorr. All right, now you have Schnorr. Okay, great. Now that's great because now you can have multi-sig on that side. But you can't do it with SegWit v0, so you have to upgrade to SegWit v1 in order to do it, because otherwise you're going to lose the malleability protections in SegWit that SegWit v0 kind of was a lot of it was about for Lightning usage and stuff like that. So if you're going to upgrade the script anyway, you should do things properly, and that's where the op success and the check sig things come in, and that covers all of the things. So we're bundling these things because of the benefits that we're getting in combination. And if you're going to upgrade script anyway, you should upgrade and make sure that they're done in a reasonable way. An alternative deployment path for Taproot technologies, a separate soft fork for Merkle branch witness based on Taproot. It's not clear to me what Merkle branch witnesses are. Google comes up with blah, which don't go into specifics. There's different mask proposals in Bitcoin, such as BIP 116, 117 versus BIP 114, and BIP 114 and Taproot's BIP 341 have a similar approach. BIP 116, on the other hand, gives Merkle verify opcode. BIP 117 provides a tail call semantic that combine allow a script to produce mask semantics, though in a more programmable way. If you had a cat opcode, you could have two masks in a single script, combine that result, then execute it, for instance. A separate soft fork for Schnorr signatures, a separate follow-up soft fork which enables Taproot and Graftroot. In order to do something like BIP 341's Merkle script paths, you need a new SegWit version where the script pub key would be the Merkle root of scripts. If it's not combined with Schnorr signatures, you need to provide leaf versions or change the way checksig works for how it works now in order to upgrade Schnorr later. But if we're designing soft fork 1 in a particular way because we already know we want to make particular changes from soft fork 2, I don't think it makes much sense to split them up. Having done both of those in order to do Taproot, you need another new SegWit version so that the script pub key could be a Taproot point, but could otherwise reuse the script path. Obviously, I think Taproot's desirable and roughly ready to go now, so I don't see any good reason to split that up, particularly when doing so would use up an additional SegWit version. So we're on SegWit version 0. And we have up to SegWit version 16, I think. So that means that, they're limited and we're using up SegWit version 1. A separate soft fork doing these means that we use up 2 of those versions, and that's his argument here for doing it at once. Users only have to use Schnorr signing if they want to and can otherwise continue to use ECDSA. Updating to Schnorr signing makes it easier to validate the blockchain. Batch validation gives us modest speed up once there are many Schnorr signatures, and updating to the signature hashing algorithms described in BIP 341, 342 has benefits for making hardware wallets more secure. While it's obviously fine for people not to upgrade, upgrading sooner rather than later does have systemic benefits. Yeah, so that's AJ's response. Hopefully that explains why we're doing all of these changes at the same time. I thought it was very insightful for all of that. Let's take a look at questions, and then we will finish the show. All right, I already talked about masks. Is Taproot basically means that all transactions appear the same to external blockchain observer? Yes, that is exactly right. So it doesn't matter if it's pay to pubkey hash or pay to script hash. You have no idea when you just look at the output. It's just Taproot. It could be script hash, it could be multisig, it could be single key. You have no idea. There's no way to tell, and that's the key. Is the Taproot and Schnorr sig will be as one protocol upgrade or some other way? It will be one protocol upgrade. This is what we're calling SegWit v1 or Taproot, and that will hopefully go through in the next 12 months or so. All right, so that's about it. Hopefully that answers your questions and gives you some insight into what's going on with Taproot. I know I spent a lot of it, and hopefully if you appreciate that, please pound that like button and let other people know about this video so they can discover it. Anyway, that was it for today. You guys know about my books and my seminars and so on. I am working on some sort of a wallet software that's multi-sig. It'll have to change once Taproot comes along, but for now I do want like multi-hardwire wallets, and this is more to scratch my own itch because I'm not happy with my current setup. I would love to get more feedback on it if you're interested. Maybe I'll do a write-up or something like that. Anyway, that is about it for me for today. Fiat delenda est. This song is done.